Welcome to Truth Telling with Elizabeth Zialto, the podcast dedicated to exploring the truth that's always evolving within us and around us, where we explore the potentiality of truth as a highly esteemed value, especially in the context of everything that falls under categories like healing, growth, leadership, creativity, spirituality, love and relationships, boundaries, and more. If you're new to me, just so you know who you're signing up to listen to here, I'm the creator of a body of work called Wild Soul Movement, which is rooted in embodiment practices. So that includes all kinds of medicine for the body, mind, heart, and soul. I work privately with clients in the Akashic Records, and I hold a variety of gatherings, workshops, masterclasses, and trainings, both online and in person throughout the year. This podcast will be 5 years old in 2020, as will my self-published book, Untame Yourself. I'm also an avid Latin dancer, salsa and bachata being my favorites, and occasionally I do stand-up comedy for fun. I share all of that with you to let you know that this is a place where you can come with your multiple talents and interests and passions to be encouraged, nourished, and cultivated. We are all more than just one thing, and part of our truth telling on this show is to celebrate that. The main intention here, though, is to contribute to creating a kinder, gentler, more curious, collaborative, and reverent world where people respect each other's backgrounds, experiences, and truths, and they trust in themselves and in life and recognize that we really do need each other. So we publish episodes twice a month, and if you want to know when they're going live, you can follow me on Instagram at Elizabeth Zialto. You can also enter your name and email anywhere at wildsoulmovement.com. and you will get updates from us. One last thing, no episode of this show is ever meant for everybody, but they are all meant for the right person at the right time. So thank you so much for being here with me. That was an introduction to the show. Now, let me tell you more specifically about today's episode. What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode number 336 of Truth Telling with Elizabeth Zialto. I am your host, Elizabeth Zialto, and I am so excited for today's episode about divesting from perfectionism. This is not your typical conversation about perfectionism, and I'm warning you up front, you're probably going to want to listen to this at least 3 or 4 times. So today my guest is my dear friend Jess Fish, who is also, and I'm sure she would not own up to this, but I get to call her this, a freaking genius. Her big truth was around the importance of community and external affirmation. And from there we talked about practicing radical encouragement in your relationships and how we cannot rely on self-regulation alone. We talked about the myth of inconveniencing people. You know how sometimes you tell yourself, oh, I shouldn't bother them, or oh, I don't want to inconvenience, oh, they have a lot of stuff going on. That's a total myth. And we got into why we think we are a burden and how we need to be honest about our own bandwidth and our own overgiving tendencies, and also all the offshoots of perfectionism, like overachieving, having unreasonably high standards for ourselves, and the trap of high performance. And this was a cool personal part of the conversation for me because I am not someone who's ever identified as a perfectionist, but I certainly have unreasonably high standards for a lot of things. So Jess also explained how all of this keeps us in individual mindsets, which keeps us upholding dominant cultural narratives and norms, and really also keeps us from getting the support that we need, keeps us in survival mode, and really does not help us thrive. So she also shared an exercise with us that she uses in the Divesting from Perfectionism workshops that she teaches. And this is an exercise that literally changes people's lives on the spot. So I'm excited for you all to have that experience. And I can't wait to hear from you about what that brings up for you, how that goes. She also walked me through the fantasy of the ideal self that many of us have and how it harms us. And I know a lot of you are going to be able to relate to that as well. We also explored what being in community with people who will hold you compassionately accountable looks like, and also how we can all leverage the things we're really good at as our contribution to dismantling systems of oppression. We've had a lot of conversations on the podcast over the last few years about what that looks like. And I know a lot of people's number one concern is, I'm not doing enough, I don't want to get it wrong, So Jess really helps to poke a hole in a lot of those arguments and helps you figure out what you could be doing and how you could be contributing, probably in ways you never even realized. So I'm excited for you to get that as well. This is a really juicy and a really meaty conversation. The show notes are at untameyourself.com/336. There's a lot of links in these show notes. Jess referenced some authors, some teachers, some essays. There's a couple posts that we reference. So everything that you need links to from the show is at untameyourself.com/336. And then there's also an amazing plot twist with this episode, because at the time we were recording it, I shared an experience to kind of put into the lab of Jess's concepts here about, perfectionism, how shame shows up and stuff like that. And I was having an experience that hadn't yet resolved itself, and then resolved itself in a beyond miraculous way hours after we had this conversation. And so the gist of it is also in a link on the show notes page. I will link you up to the Instagram post where I told the story, although some of you probably already saw it online or read my email about it. But the 90-second overview is that for those of you who are familiar with the author Glennon Doyle, she's a New York Times bestselling author. She's a very large platform, like 640 or 650,000 followers on Instagram. Her most recent book is called Untamed. And obviously you heard me reference the show notes earlier at untameyourself.com/336. I've owned that domain since 2015 when I self-published my book, which is called Untame Yourself. And so on Tuesday of last week, Glennon made a post and she used the term untame yourself. Now, she didn't know who I was. She didn't know anything about my work. She was not stealing my title or anything like that. She just, that term had occurred to her and it was in this post. And on that post, she had asked her followers to tag people that inspire them to untame themselves. So one of my students tagged me, which is how I saw the post. And I was having a moment of really feeling like, oh man, this person's platform is so much bigger than mine. And now they're using this word and brand confusion, like all these things started going through my mind. And, I was having a little bit of an ego tantrum, feeling a little ashamed of all the ways that I should have promoted my book better 5 years ago and all this stuff. And so I asked for some support, and a bunch of my friends went over and tagged me on that post. And through my act of asking for support, I ended up being someone who got tagged several times on the post. What I didn't know was that Glennon was going to make a follow-up post where she highlighted 5 of the people who had been tagged a lot, and I was one of those people. And so in a second post later that day, she had a whole screenshot of my profile and wrote a little blurb. Apparently she had gone to my page and gone down the rabbit hole of Wild Soul Movement and was super impressed and said all these beautiful things about me and about the work. And so it was this raving endorsement that she posted on her Instagram to 640,000 people. And within 2 days, 6,000 people followed me. That's some people's entire Instagram following. It was so amazing, and her people are so enthusiastic, so curious, so open, amazing listeners, commenting on the post. It's just been this incredible boost to our community. And I know some of you are probably listening to this podcast right now because you found me on Glennon's post. So it was super generous. It was a really beautiful act of women uplifting each other. It was so freaking amazing. And so you'll hear in this episode, I'm talking about it before that had happened. And I was still kind of in process with my initial feelings. So I thought it would be cool to let you know the outcome. So it's kind of like you got to flip to the end of the book before, reading the chapter that you'll hear in the episode here. So enjoy. This is an incredible conversation. I know these things like perfectionism, super high standards, over-functioning, high performing, and being really hard on yourselves is something a lot of you can relate to. I cannot wait to hear how the episode lands for you. As always, you can email us at hello@wildsoulmovement.com. You can come find me on Instagram, comment on a post, or send me a DM. I always respond. And as well, remember now, we are gathering weekly for Wild Soul Movement sessions in my Wild Soul Sacred Body membership community. And so you can get the details for that over at wildsoulmovement.com/gather if you want to take your connection and your practice of all the different types of things, especially the embodiment related things that we talk about on the show, into a deeper practice, and also be in a community where we share incredible conversations, guidance, wisdom, resources, all kinds of things with Wild Soul women literally all over the world, which is kind of cool. So that's at wildsoulmovement.com/gather. And I am done with this very long intro. Let us, at long last, get into today's episode. What's up, y'all? We are doing fewer interviews in 2020. So I want you to know that the people who I am interviewing are people who either their work means a lot to me, just them as a person means a lot to me, both. And today's interview is a both. This is Jessica Fish. This is one of my favorite humans on the planet. Huge blessing to my LA life in the last, it's only been 6 to 8 months since we met,
It
right?
was the summer. Yeah.
Girl.
We were wearing shorts.
What did I ever do without you?
I feel the same.
How was I functioning? So you have listened to the podcast, so you know what I'm going to ask you first. How's your body today? How you feeling?
So I am feeling really good. I woke up this morning and it was overcast and a little wet outside. Mm-hmm. And I love it when Los Angeles has weather. Yeah. I'm from New Hampshire, I'm from New England, and it makes me so happy. So I went outside, I drank my coffee outside, I meditated outside, I soaked it all in, and now of course it's sunny and 72.
I know. But we don't complain about this, but again, also from the East Coast, when it was an overcast day, I'm like, yes! That usually never lasts a full day though.
Nope, I love it, and it was good. And then my back, jaw, and neck are tight for always. Mm-hmm. Yeah, par for course.
Yeah, I'm sure some people can relate to that. So I know this is a loaded ass question to ask you, and I'm so excited to hear what the number one answer is. What is a truth that's having a big impact on your life right now?
I have had to winnow down. There are so many. Okay, but the thing that comes through the most right now for me is the importance of community and external affirmation. So being human is hard. Being human in the face of where we're at collectively, politically, culturally, it's really hard. And I really believe in practicing radical encouragement for the people in my life.
And you're so good at it. Let me just say firsthand.
Thank you.
So good at it.
Yeah. A friend of mine was visiting for her birthday last weekend, and we were out for dinner, and she looked at my partner and she was like, I feel like I can do anything with Jessica in my corner. And, she called me a cheerleader, and it was so humbling and made my heart so full, but it is this practice that I have. And I think that we all have so many voices in our head, and that we have gotten to a place where we feel like we have to self-regulate. Mm-hmm. We have to take care of it, right? We can't inconvenience people. But there's a real power when someone else in your life tells you you're doing a great job, or says, you know what, you're having trouble getting through with writing this book, send me what you got. And then just explodes encouragement onto it, as well as, thoughtful feedback. And so why can't we rely on each other more to shut up those voices in our head, right? We should not be alone in facing our independent imposter syndromes. And I always kind of think about, we move from this place when we're younger of being told, whether it's from friends or family or even, Mr. Rogers, that we can do anything. And the older we get, the less that we hear that. And so I just think as adults, yeah, I'm not going to be an astronaut
Mhm.
anymore. So I can't be anything, but I can be told that I can do that thing.
Yeah.
And I can have people hold space for that in a way that makes me feel less alone. Because it's hard and it's scary.
Yeah. This is so there's a couple things here that I think are so important that I really want to dig into for a second, because the self-regulation piece, the feeling like we might inconvenience other people. There was a viral post, and I'm forgetting the name of the woman. It was a tweet, and that it just like really went viral. I think it's Melissa something. I'll look it up. We'll put it in the show notes. But she was writing something about doing emotional labor in friendships. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And people kind of lost their minds around, I mean, the gist of her post was, listen, we don't all always have space for our friends, even if we love them dearly. And we need to be able to say, hey, I don't have space for this today. And she used the term emotional labor, which some people felt was like co-opting language of, activism and social justice,
Sure,
which is your
sure.
field. And so I'm just super curious, where do you find the line? Where's the line and where's the balance? It's going to be different for everyone, but like we need to ask for help. And you and I have talked about this offline. I am a pretty self-sufficient, self-regulating person. And then there are days when I'm like, I just can't pull myself up by my bootstraps today. I know I'm great. I know what I'm capable of, but I need some loving that is
Yeah,
not coming from, God or within. I need some
yeah.
human ass loving.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, right. And so we need to lean on each other. And so the piece around, when my cup is full and when I can give. So when I'm in a low point, or when I'm so something we'll talk about, because we're going to talk about my work around perfectionism,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
something that's going to come out right away is that I have bipolar disorder.
Hmm.
And so when I am in a low, and what's so terrifying is I don't know if it's going to be a low for 3 days or a low for like 3 months.
Hmm.
Something that I communicate to the people who are closest in my life is I'm not going to be as proactively reaching out and remembering things and checking in and encouraging and saying, yeah, send me that, let's work on this together. But if you need me, I just need you to tell me you need me, and I'm there, and I will find my inner strength.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's one of the ways that I engage with that piece. I think that as friends, we have to be more honest about the bandwidth that we have in any
Yeah.
given moment, because when we're not, I have found myself overextending, and then I get resentful. But
Yes.
I have nobody to blame but myself,
Hmm.
right? And I think it also helps to get super clear about what you are good at in terms of holding space and cheerleading other people.
Yeah.
So for me, a lot of that is I'm really good at getting into the trenches with you. Like I will get in there, and we will, if you're the person who like needs to have a plan of attack and some accountability and some like deep love through this process, I am your person. If you're the person, one of my closest friends is going through a really difficult uh, time in a relationship, and it has been just months of like being super available for them to process, we call it their scribble pad on
Hmm.
DMs. And I'm just a witness, because
Yeah.
it's a lot, it's a lot. And we've talked about that, and we have this boundary of I will read everything. I will, give feedback, but ultimately this is a place for you to vent
Yeah.
and for me to hold space. And I don't have to engage with every little thing, and that's cool.
Yeah. I find so this is a really important part. What are we good at? How do we hold space? And just being clear with our friends, what they can expect from us, what they can ask of us. It just feels so responsible, so that we're not having these like mismatched expectations and then hurt feelings, right? Because some people will feel hurt that someone can't give them what they need, but it's kind of misplaced if someone give you what you need. This is like a love languages thing too, right? Some people are epic at words of affirmation. Some people are more acts of service. Some people are, going to come over and they'll clean your apartment for you.
Oh,
Some
I
people
love that person.
are going to like send you a gift in the mail or flowers or make you
Mhm.
feel special. And that might not be what you needed, but you can be available. You can receive what's being offered and know that it's love,
Mhm.
and vice
Yeah.
versa. But it's good to know who's loving you and how, and just be clear about that. And I
Yeah.
also find it so interesting. One of the things that informs me about my friendships is who I'm willing to be there for, in what way and what capacity.
Mhm.
Because there's some people, like, you're like an anything, anytime, whatever, call me at 4 a.m. person I would pick up. And I have some friends in my life who I wouldn't actually. And that's nothing against those people. It just, it's almost like a Marie Kondo. Does this spark joy?
But
It's
you're
like,
not the right person for them in that moment.
exactly, exactly. Yeah.
And we
Does
have
it,
to have the discernment,
yep.
right, in those relationships to know that. Just like there is not everything is for me to go to my partner with.
Yeah.
And that's something we talk about, but two things I wanted to just hit on from what you were just saying. So the piece around love language is really interesting, and one of the pieces I think we forget to talk about is that we are most likely to give love in the way that we want to receive love,
Yep.
right? So I am words of affirmating people all the time because that's what I need. That's what really resonates for me. And so I've had to learn, a friend of mine, the love language is gifts. And I melt down when I have to buy gifts. I feel like I'm really bad at it, but I've been stretching myself, even as just little things every once in a while, because this is important to me to show up for them in the way that they feel most loved. And so that's a practice, right, of this external community affirmation. Um, and and one more piece on the proactive. So it's both with friends, but also in work relationships. So something that has been really a huge stretch and difficult for me has been talking to my colleagues about there are going to be days that I have really bad days, and I might not be able to make that call, or I might really need some additional support. And I'm really interested in thinking about psychological safety
Yeah.
in workplaces, and how few of us have the safety to show up with mental health issues. And again, this all ties into this larger conversation about expectations of ourselves, of what does showing up perfectly mean?
Mm-hmm.
What do we need? When can we express those needs? And how do we express them with folks who operate in different places in our lives?
Yeah. Yeah. Whew. It's so good. And just so many great things to consider and feel into. And I know sometimes there's a point in a conversation where I could feel, even though we're pre-recording this, like kind of feel into the future of people listening going, oh my God, thank you for saying that. Oh my God, she gets me. Oh, like I feel like there's space for me, at least in this conversation, because certainly not all environments are set up for people to even feel like they can say. And a lot of folks have to operate pretending like they're
Yeah.
not having an experience they are because they need their freaking job.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And I'm going to break the fourth wall for a second and just say hi and thank you to everyone who's listening to this. I feel so grateful to be here and to be in conversation with people. And yeah, you know what? Y'all are doing a great job.
Yeah. Yeah. All of you. We don't even need to know who you are individually. You definitely are. Being alive is not easy.
Being human is hard.
It's freaking hard. So, I remember where we were sitting at the Wing in West Hollywood when you started to tell me about this divesting from perfectionism work that you do. And perfectionism has always been such an interesting thing for me personally because I'm a Virgo, and all the like scratch the surface horoscopes and psychology are like
Yep.
Virgos, perfectionists. And I've always been like, I'm not really a
Mm-hmm.
perfectionist,
Mm-hmm.
but like I'm super discerning about certain things. And if I value something, the amount of like effort and care that I will put
Yeah.
into it and the details is immense. So I'm so curious. Um, to hear your take. And I'm open to seeing how I actually am a perfectionist, because I have a feeling that's going to be my discovery process in this conversation.
Well, not everyone identifies as a perfectionist. And
Right.
for those of you out there who are feeling like Elizabeth, there's still something in this for you.
Of course.
Because I think even those that don't identify as a perfectionist can see themselves in some areas of their lives as being an overachiever.
Yeah.
Right? As pushing themselves to the brink of experiencing burnout. So my kind of elevator, spiel, or my shtick around perfectionism is that it's incredibly subjective, right? It is ultimately shaped by, our soul, how our soul comes in. I believe in that. Shaped by our personality, personal and familial conditioning. But this thing about perfectionism that I'm really interested in is how it keeps us constricted, anxious, questioning our self-worth, keeps us in these individual mindsets. And I think all of that so that we don't see the systems that are at play that make us constantly wonder if we're good enough.
Yeah.
So this, the divestment piece for me is, I believe in that divesting. So like getting rid of something we no longer want. Divesting in perfectionism is actually a way to divest in dominant culture.
Yeah.
And when I say dominant culture, I'm talking about white supremacy, patriarchy, imperialism, heteronormativity, Christian hegemony, like all of these overlapping structural forms of oppression that really, they really depend on us striving for something that we can actually never achieve.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so, there's an intensity to all of that you and I were talking before we hit record on this. And I love, there's always some synchronicity in anything I do, whether I'm doing embodied healing sessions, teaching wild soul movement, doing an Akashic Records reading, doing an interview. Typically something occurs in my own life within 72 hours of the event that's so relevant for the event. And just this morning, Glennon Doyle, who has a giant platform, some of you are probably familiar with her, made a post. She has her most recent book that came out is called Untamed. And those of you who've been with me for a while know that the original name of this podcast when it launched in 2015 was Untamed the Wild Soul. And I wrote a book called Untame Yourself. And actually all the show notes for this podcast exist at untameyourself.com/ whatever is the number of the episode. So this morning, Glennon Doyle literally makes a post that says Untame Yourself. And I personally do not have a lot of like ego moments of things that happen that can even make me feel that small. But I had a moment of being like, wow, I've been cultivating this body of work for 5 years. And here comes Glennon Doyle. And I went there, y'all. This skinny, pretty white lady with her big ass platform, just boxing me out and claiming my words. It's like, and they're not my words. I know. But the ego was like, oh, she's taking my shit. And of course, there's also the piece of, and I'm sure she doesn't even know I exist, right? So she's not stealing. It's like this unintentional, but I was like,
But, being in conversation with your ego is so important when these things pop up, right? Like, so you're like fast tracking your processing on all of this, right? Yeah. Like we're able to talk about it a couple hours later. And she has a smile on her face. But it's also the attachment, and that like also, but these power dynamics, right? And we can't separate those out. And it's complicated. How are you feeling now?
Well, this is the thing actually, and I'm so glad you said power dynamics, because we've touched on power dynamics in some of these conversations, but I'd be really curious, like what is the role that power dynamics play in the whole perfectionism thing? And I'm not deflecting your question. I'm going to answer it. The way I feel now, like there's a whole reckoning actually happening in my life around, this is my 10th year in my business. And it super relates to what you're
Yeah.
talking about, because of course there are these narratives in my mind telling me that I should be further along, or my platform should be bigger, or that I should be making more money, or that I shouldn't be in this position where someone with a larger platform can like take my, like, you know what I mean? Someone's like, you should hire a lawyer, send a cease and desist. And I'm like, I don't have a budget for that right now. So even like some shame around that, and like all these different like angles and layers. But I mean, ultimately the reason why I'm okay is because my spiritual practice and my spiritual beliefs are always going to be the overarching thing that I'm like, I don't own any of this. There is a collective intelligence, and it's not a cop out, right? And ultimately, and I left a comment on her post to say, I am glad to see, I've been doing work under this name for many years, but I am glad to see this reaching a larger portion of the collective mind, because we need it. And honestly, that is my loudest and truest belief. That if more people are waking up feeling like they can untame, break the rules, break their lineages, interrupt the patterns, dismantle whatever, that's a good thing for all of us.
Yeah.
So my temper tantrums don't last long, because I'm more attached to the bigger picture than my role in it,
Yeah. So I'll get to power dynamics. So I want to talk about how I see perfectionism show up in organizations, and in workplaces, and of course, power dynamics super rife in those places. But something that you talked about around, I should be, shooting yourself, right? I should be
all over
further
myself.
along, all over.
Need a diaper.
And so there is, when I do workshops around this, there's an activity that I do that I don't know, it came to me maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, and I use it all the time myself. And it's called when then, because I think that perfectionism is very much related to expectation and time. And we have this like conditional piece that we attach to being perfect or achieving. So I'm going to give you some examples. So when I do these workshops, it's incredible. There's folks from all different backgrounds and identities.
Because where are you doing them? Where are you doing these? I know you do them in real life.
Yeah. So at conferences, within organizations, retreats, and I've been really lucky to, work with hundreds and hundreds of people and see how universal this is. The shame, the blame, I'm not far enough along, and the way in which it impacts us all. We all feel alone in this, and then you get people standing up in a room of like 100 or 200 people sharing what they've written in this exercise, and you get 30 or 40 of those people to share a sentence, and the air, like everybody is just so much lighter, because we realize this is what living under systems of oppression does to all of us. This is what being socialized into white supremacy, into patriarchy does to all of us. And now obviously we all have to have different commitments. Like where I have dominant identities, I have different commitments to break that down. And I engage with it in a very different way. So I'm going to give you a couple of these when-thens.
Cool.
When I have enough money, I won't need to work so hard. When I lose 15 pounds, I can stop hating myself. When I have more friends, I'll feel that I matter. When I've totally healed from this breakup, then I can date again. When I get promoted, I'll be happier. When my family accepts me, I'll feel whole. When we've gotten abortion access for all, then I can rest. When I can speak English without an accent, then I'll be taken seriously at work. Right? And so for me, most of my life, the biggest when then that I had was, when I get through this next stressful period, then I won't feel crazy anymore. And I air quote crazy because it's a complicated word. But for me, with my mental health history, it's something that I have actually found really useful. So, when I try this medication, then I'm going to feel better. When I've had, like, you know, done my meditation, done my exercise, and done it consistently, when I've done all those things, then I will be healed. And so part of my journey was really getting to a place where I had to realize, like, oh no, this has been with me my whole life, and this is never going to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do I reorient myself to my relationship to self-expectation, and what the very high standards I've put on myself in my life around being perfect. And being perfect certainly had no space for being bipolar.
Mm-hmm. And so, and you just used a term, which again, for those of us who might not necessarily fully identify, I think you just showed me my in with perfectionism, but my standards
Mm,
out of control
yep.
for a lot of things on myself and on others. So something I've been dancing with lately is love. On Valentine's Day, I wrote a post, and one of the things that I wrote was, because we're recording this a couple days after Valentine's Day, I wish there was another term for not being in a committed monogamous partnership aside from single, because single
Yeah.
implies being alone, and
Yeah.
there's so many of us who are not operating either or participating in a committed monogamous model or relationship at this time, who are so not alone,
Yeah.
whether it's because we have amazing friends, family, soul family, lovers, lover friends, whatever, or if you're just dating.
Yeah.
And for some people, though, there are standards, there are not. People are testing things out and seeing where they are. And these when thens have me thinking about, especially at our age, we're both 36, so like this mid to late 30s.
37.
Oh, you're 37. I just leaped you.
Yeah.
You're
And
right.
I wear the glasses to make myself look older, because
You look very young.
when I'm older, then I'll be taken seriously.
There you go. There's another one. But there's also when someone chooses me, I will be valuable.
Oh.
Or validated or something, right? Like, because we have experiences because of the culture, right? That one of the dominant parts of our culture is marriage, is family, is having children. That's like a path that many of us are told we should aspire to.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with it, but we're not necessarily living in an age where that is
It's not for everybody. And it's
not
not
for everybody.
accessible to everybody.
Everybody. But those of us who are operating outside of that have had experiences of feeling like people don't take us seriously. Oh, you don't understand, right? There's some real condescension that happens with that and a lot of these other experiences that you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's ouchy.
It's ouchy. And, and the high standards piece is we do that to ourselves.
We
And
agree to it.
right. And so there's this piece around perfectionism or having high standards or being an overachiever that is a form of self-harm. And it can be a motivator to a point. And I'm not saying that wanting something to be, great or air quote perfect is always a bad thing. But I think for a lot of us, it can get out of control pretty easily, and then becomes this place of self-harm, because a lot of times we never achieve those wins. And we move the mark, right? So
yes.
I might lose the 10 pounds, but then, well, it's not really until I lose the 10 more that I can pull the bikini out of the back of the closet, right?
Yeah.
And so if we can't hit a target, then we're just perpetuating our own misery.
The metaphor I always think about for this is if you've ever been like out on or near the ocean or on any kind of boat, I mean, as the farther you go, the horizon moves.
Yeah.
It's always moving. When you're standing at the shore, there's the horizon. When you're out at that point on the water, that horizon is how much further out. And are we stopping and celebrating the milestones to even acknowledge that we got anywhere?
No. No, I mean, our psychology is built in a way that we don't demarcate, we don't celebrate, we don't, you know, we don't come together collectively to celebrate those things. Like, I remember from a young age, I knew that marriage didn't appeal to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember having conversations about, well, like, I want a wedding for when I finish grad school. Like, that's how I want to, like, really celebrate this big thing in my life with, an awesome, huge party. And so not taking the time to celebrate even the much, like, the things that feel smaller. We're depriving ourselves, and we're depriving, I think, each other
Mm-hmm.
as well. When you talk about another word for single, something that I think about often is being in communion,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, to be in communion with lots of different people and relationship with lots of different people. And I don't know, it's a word that I really love. And this is what happens when you talk to somebody who went to divinity school.
Yeah.
I'll come at you with these words, but there's something really sacred in what you're saying about just amplifying and putting more emphasis on those different types of relationships.
Yeah. And that goes for anything, right? Because when we're talking about standards, how do we even develop our standards? We develop them based on what we've been told by the dominant culture, as you've mentioned. The markers are that we should aim for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I have this theory that inside all of our brains lives the thing that we compare ourselves the most to, which
Mm-hmm.
is ideal Jessica or ideal Elizabeth. We have an ideal self. And this person is actually, in most cases, like, incredibly fully realized within our brains. And it's the ultimate comparison. It is, I think, one of the biggest sources of imposter complex. And when I first sat down and actually wrote out the characteristics of the ideal Jessica that lives in my brain, it just poured out. I mean, in like 5 minutes, I had 15 things, right? And they ranged from, I wake up early every day and meditate and read a spiritual text, to I don't ever inconvenience anyone. I respond to all texts on the same day. I have a 401k. I don't have any debt. I never work on weekends. I show up to every single protest. I'm at every canvas. I am my most anti-racist self in every situation. I'm not bipolar. All of these things. And what's funny is, like, I sat back and read about this person, and I was like, she's really intense. Right? Because she also speaks like 5 languages fluently.
Right. Yes.
He, has 2 PhDs.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at this person, and I was like, I definitely wouldn't want to date this person. I'm not sure if this person would even be in my inner circle. And so what do I do with her?
Mm.
How am I in right relationship with ideal Jessica?
And
so I sat with that for a really long time.
Tell this bitch to take a nap.
Oh, yeah, right? So what I figured was, the issue is that I have been comparing myself to ideal Jessica, who holds all of these characteristics at every given point in time.
Yes.
And I can't do that. I cannot. What I can do is, can I be the person who does spend a little bit of time outside every day, the way that ideal Jessica does?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I absolutely can do that. But there are pieces in here that's never going to happen for me. Like, I am never going back to school to finish a PhD. I'm not doing it. And so there's a part in here of looking at those characteristics of your ideal self and grieving,
Yes. Thank you.
right? Like grieving those pieces that you're not either in right now or never going to be.
And what I love about grief, which is a weird thing to say, right? I love grief. I do love grief because I find it to be one of the most alchemical things we could possibly allow ourselves to fully feel and go into, is in some cases the relief
Mm,
of loosening our grip on the things that actually won't serve our higher self, soul, higher purpose, wild soul, whatever you want to call it,
yeah.
and just letting go of the grip on it.
Mhm.
And also realizing how much space and energy that thing was taking up in our
Mm,
lives. And then, like, the vacuum effect, right? The energy we get back when we go, let me just loosen my grip or release my grip on that and see what happens. And I think people freak out sometimes because they've hitched their identity so much to the pursuit of a thing.
mhm.
But then they go, so I go, just try it. Try
Yeah.
it on. Try on releasing that. You could take it back. You could literally take it back anytime. If 10
Mhm.
years from now you were like, girl, I'm going back to school, I'm getting a PhD, I would be like,
Mhm.
all right,
Right.
let's do
Right.
this.
Right. Absolutely. And thank you for the encouragement. And oftentimes those things are maybe even things that we don't want for ourselves.
Yeah.
They're not things we've ever actually even worked on or tried to work on. But they got in there somewhere, you know, from some sort of, internal narrative, family narrative, socialization. Yeah.
And I think it's also, I will say, and you've really helped me gain some perspective on this as a person who desires to contribute to the world by way of helping to dismantle the structures and systems. I've had a really hard time the last few years finding my lane in that.
Mm,
Going, what's mine to do? So I'm doing my social justice, my anti-racism, my collective liberation education. I'm getting trauma informed so my spaces can be safe as possible. No space is perfectly safe for anyone. I'm doing all of that, but then what's my role? What do I actually talk about? What do I actually teach? How do I integrate that stuff? Where is my activism? Do I even have activism? Do I need to, like, there's so much. So I think sometimes we feel like the urgency of how needed change is,
yeah.
and we go, well, shit, I guess I'm going to have to do that.
Hmm.
There's like a benevolent arrogance to that.
Right. Right. Well, so there's that, but there's also one. So a caveat is perfectionism often is a way in which we can uphold systems of oppression, because if we can't do it perfectly, we're not going to do it.
Mm,
You know, I go into this a lot when I do anti-racism trainings or work with organizations or groups that are all white or predominantly white, and that could be an entire other
yep.
podcast around perfectionism and whiteness and how it keeps us white people from showing up fully because we're so terrified of making a mistake. And as an academic and organizer, Tema Okun writes, we oftentimes confuse making a mistake with being a mistake.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I come back to that a lot.
Can you
Um,
spell that name for me, by the way? I want
yeah,
to make sure we cite that properly.
I will send you that. I'll send you a bunch of
Okay,
things you
great,
can
great,
put
great.
in show
Thank you.
notes.
Great, thanks.
I'm a teacher.
I know. I love
Um,
you.
and so that there's that piece. And so, Tema also writes about, characteristics of white supremacy culture, particularly as they show up in organizations. And one of those is a sense of urgency. And so this kind of speaks to what you were just asking about, which is this feeling like, do I need to have a hot take on everything out of the
Right.
gate, right? And what happens is if we don't take the time to build um, nuanced analysis, we can do harm.
Yes.
And where I come back to again and again in this work is kind of what I said at the beginning around friendship. You have to know what your strengths are to best leverage in our work for liberation.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know what? Not everybody's place is going to be educating on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
But not everybody's place is also going to be organizing in the streets.
Mm-hmm.
I know folks who, you know, have come to me and been like, what do I have to give? I want to be a part. And it turns out like they're really good with, you know, back-end programs or MailChimp or Excel. And we find ways that they go to, you know, organizations within their communities and say, this is what I have to give. This is what I'm really good at. And they're doing folks' taxes. Right, they're
That's
like
awesome.
setting up their uh, email whatevers.
Autoresponders and stuff.
Yeah, right. And so, what are you really good at? How can you most leverage that for liberation? And then, in the places in which you have privilege, like I always say, my whiteness is like the ultimate renewable resource. It's never going to be taken away from me. I will wake up tomorrow just as white as I am today. And so, in what spaces, in what ways do I continue to use that, to leverage that, to push myself, and to get over that fear of making a mistake? Because we all make them. And, you know, this is something, you know, my colleagues, Desiree and Erica, who are my work family, and big thanks to them for everything, you know, who have been doing this work longer than I have, talk about, you know, we all are still making mistakes and we all do this for a living.
Yeah.
And I think also, you know, you had Adrienne Marie Brown on a couple of months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And something I really appreciated was she was talking about, like, you know, extending grace. Because, you know, at some point in time, she said, you know, I was transphobic. And the reason that I learned that I was is because, you know, people pointed that out. And now I'm able to be able to have an analysis around it and speak out against it. But we only ever get to be on that side because we were on the other side, or because we had no understanding, right? And so part of it is activating to people to the work, figuring out how to leverage their gifts and talents to push themselves to get to that growing edge. But my whole piece is like, I want to keep people activated.
Yes.
And that's going to look different for different people.
Mm-hmm. I love this. And I want to just reiterate for people listening, because especially people who do follow like social justice educators online, there's some really popular people who folks will message me, you should have this person on the podcast. And I'm never going to have that person on my podcast, because they're out there telling people there's like an intensely right or wrong way to do something that leaves out everything that you just said, which goes, what are you good at? What can you offer? Like, it would be immensely valuable probably for some people to get their taxes done for free by someone who's good at it. Mm-hmm. And if that's what you can offer, what about, like, how stressful are taxes are just a great example, because most of us can relate to being super stressed out at some point or another about taxes and like worrying about, like, I hope, how much is it going to be, or how much is this going to cost me? Like, I remember last year, my family was like, it cost $500 to get my taxes done. And they weren't prepared for that. So like, that's a big thing that you could take off of someone's plate. And then that's money that they could put into something else, whether
that's
it's
community.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And that is the only way we're going to survive.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just appreciate how you said, what are you good at? How can you leverage that for liberation and allow that to be a valid contribution?
Absolutely.
I think a lot of the conversation is, am I doing enough? Is that enough? This is enough. That's that. Mm-hmm. Is it valid? Yeah. Do that and then do more, you know?
And have, you know, be in community with people who are going to hold you compassionately accountable.
Yeah.
who are going to be in conversation with you as you're doing this work to help you grow and process and hold yourself accountable. Because what I often see is people wake up. So there's a framework by Dr. Barbara Love called the liberatory consciousness model. And the first phase is awareness. And in the awareness stage, people like wake up to like, oh my gosh, like systemic racism is real. Have you heard about the prison industrial complex? Right? Like white people have this like big, like, oh my gosh, right? And so what often happens is they skip the second step, which is analysis, and jump straight to the third step, which is action.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. Desiree was on the podcast a while back, over a year ago. And but say it again, because some people come in, they're new, they might not have heard it. They should go back. This is shit we all need to hear over again. So, and she said the same exact, I love this. Keep going.
So Desiree is my colleague.
I know.
So all of our work is based in this. And so if you don't take the time to develop an analysis, you go to action. And oftentimes this is where we do harm, because we have that sense of urgency. We're jumping in, and particularly in race, whiteness tells us that we can fix things, right? Like it is this white saviorism piece that comes through. It is, I am not used to listening and stepping back and taking direction from others. I'm used to being able to be a immediate expert. And so we need to take that time to develop an analysis, and figure out what are those right actions. What are the ways that I can leverage my skills? But what often happens is that, I'll see people, take that first step and get rebuked and then shut down,
right? And
not engage. And we don't have time for that. I need everybody doing this work right now. And across oppressions, across, identities and power structures. And so the last A in this 4A framework is accountability. And something that Desiree often says is that we have to stop thinking about accountability as being punitive. And so, for me, I think about like this piece around collective affirmation. What about collective accountability that is totally rooted in an ethic of care? And holding each other close, growing together in this work.
What's an example of that? Like and this feels like a balm, BALM, to perfectionism, an ethic of care. What does that even look like?
So part of it is this like vulnerability, right? Is being able to show up and talk about, I feel, I haven't sworn yet in this podcast. I'm impressed with myself. Like I feel like crap. Because I haven't achieved all these things, or this work product isn't perfect, or I'm not perfect. So part of that is showing up with that vulnerability to each other. For me, an ethic of care is knowing that I am going to be held even if I royally screw up. And this is something that the people who I am closest with and the people who are my family in doing justice work, something we'll say to each other is, you can screw up so big and I will have your back and I will be here for you to help you grow and learn through it. You are not going to be alone, thrown to the wolves. And that, I think, also gives you the courage to move forward, right? And so we have to be able to like understand that sometimes our intent isn't going to match our impact. We are going to cause harm. Even people who do this work, we cause harm. And we have to have a community and that like ethic of care to know that we will be held even in those moments and held accountable.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But in a way in which there is redemption and growth.
And something I'm so into is the importance in accountability of repair. I feel like that's what accountability, that's part of it, is repair. And also I feel this goes back to something you said earlier. We all have different commitments. One of the reasons we can hold people with an ethic of care is because we know they're committed.
Yeah.
So we're
and
like,
we're in relationship with them.
yeah.
Right. And this is the biggest issue we see when we go into organizations that say we want to center anti-oppression work, right? We want to be anti-racist. And we go in and the folks with power don't actually have any sort of relationship with the people who are causing harm within the organization, in which they can, sit down and have a meaningful conversation and start, doing, being able to mediate and create structures for repair. They don't have relationships with the people who are experiencing harm.
Right. And so then why would those people trust them to have conversations about repair?
And for me, like, I mentioned psychological safety earlier. So many of us work in spaces in which we are expected, work is supposed to be like the number one or number two thing in our life. We are expected to spend more time at work and more time with our colleagues than we do with anybody else other than our family.
Yeah.
And yet we are not being held with care in those spaces.
It's a lot of energy to have to account for in the other areas of your life.
And, particularly, we have folks within, whether it's in our online circle, our communities, and our organizations, and wherever we are, there is this, like, how I was talking about ideal Jess? In whatever space we operate in, there is like ideal Instagram activist and what that person looks like, right? There is ideal staff member. Right. And so for those of you who like work within an institution or an organization, if I asked you the question, like, what does the ideal employee look like? Again, we're going to have this list of all of these things. They're going to have a certain type of education. They're going to have a certain kind of network. They're going to be, usually an extrovert comes out when we ask folks about this. They're a fluent English speaker. They're documented. They have a co-parent. They have a Western name. They work really fast. All of these things, and then all of that's compounded when you have when you show up to these spaces with non-dominant identities or overlapping, intersecting. And so then we're asking people, we ask people to conform. I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent there,
but
good.
It's funny.
This is stuff that I love talking about, and I just went down the rabbit hole.
And it's all valuable, and the show often goes on tangents. And those of you who watch on YouTube know, like, if I'm looking down, it's because I'm taking notes. And one of the things while you were talking was, and sometimes actually taking the notes helps me to listen more deeply, which is an interesting way the brain works. But I was thinking about this conversation like an octopus, where the body is perfectionism and all like the tentacle arms are all the different things that we've discussed that stem from perfectionism or over functioning, overachieving, having high standards, which all kind of feel like they're in the same, they kind of hover in the same nucleus there.
Yeah.
So, but I want to come back to your when-thens. Because I feel like some of the things that we've touched on are like, there's all these when-thens built into that. So when you do that exercise with the people, Like okay, so we listed them. Is it a matter of like you list them and people see how many they can relate to? Do you have them write their own? Like what else, where else does that
Yeah.
exercise take people in terms of creating the awareness or the analysis around the
Yes.
perfectionism?
So, people do that activity and they write as many as they want. I think the power comes in sharing and hearing others and seeing
Mm-hmm.
yourself reflected. Um, and then we do that ideal person living in your head. And so everyone, writes down those ideal characteristics of themselves. But the next step is in mapping all of those to things like sizeism,
Mm-hmm.
ableism, internalized homophobia, right? Internalized racism, internalized dominance, white saviorism, capitalism, right? And so looking at where are all of these things that I am measuring myself against, how have these been, co-constructed
Mm-hmm.
with all of these systems, and then come out as these isms that
Yeah.
are impacting me directly, right?
Yeah.
And so this is the divestment piece. Like I I'm so motivated to give a middle finger to all of these isms that has actually been a huge motivator in me letting go of some of this, because I've now
Yes.
been able to contextualize it within me feeling really shitty that I don't have a 401k and that I have debt makes me like, that is completely tied to capitalism.
Yep.
That is completely tied to me being told that my worth is contingent upon how much I produce.
Mm-hmm. I want to give an example because this is something that I've been working for the last several years. And it relates to, like, I mean, I used to be in the fitness industry and I used to have the kind of body that this culture encourages people to aspire to,
Mm-hmm.
right? A level of fitness that is advertised as an ideal, right? And what's interesting is when I was in that body, there wasn't really a time when I saw a picture of myself or looked in the mirror and couldn't have still pinpointed something that needed to be
Mm-hmm.
better or something that wasn't good enough. And in some cases, some of these things, so this goes back to I'll call her Ideal Liz, because these were in the years of Liz. There's a reason why I claimed Elizabeth,
Mm.
my full queen ass name, when I was 32 or 33. Because Liz was always like striving and hustling in some cases to hit an ideal that literally, like, anatomically, physiologically wasn't
Mm.
possible for me because I'm like 5'3" and have the bone structure I have and have the booty and the ass that I have. Like, the shit's not going anywhere. There's only so much carb restriction I can do, you know? And then how's that affecting, my mood and all these things? But when I started dating, after my last relationship, when I started dating, and this was the first time I'd been single in my larger body, I'm just going to call it, and all of that is relative. And I also acknowledge that my larger body is still a relatively small body in the scope of body size, right? And I remember really feeling like, is anyone even going to be attracted to me?
Yeah.
And what I found was not only were so many people still attracted to me, but this like interesting factor of some of the conditioning that men, because I'm a heterosexual person, have about being attracted to my kind of body, which still isn't even that large of a body. Like, there's so many things here. Like, I'm trying to be delicate about it because I don't
Yeah.
want to like create harm in how I'm describing it. But it's like the shame some people have about wanting what they want because it's not in the norm, or what is it Audre Lorde, The Mythical Norms?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So like, I'm out here feeling self-conscious. There's so many people that are attracted to me, feeling like conflicted about being like so gross on so many levels. And all of it points to missing out on like the love and connection and affection and appreciation that's available because we're all measuring things against these freaking ideals or dominant whatevers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
It's so infuriating.
it is.
And so then obviously in my body of work, my middle finger is going, okay, I'm going to love the shit out of this. I'm not going to care what anyone thinks. I'm going to divest myself from other people's reactions and responses to my body. I don't care. Like, I can't care. I'm pretty close to not caring at all, but that shit's hard work.
It's so hard. Yeah, I mean, I'm not there. Yeah, I constantly question or think that my work isn't good enough, and then I have to like sit back and have that conversation with myself and continually push. Yeah, and you know, there's something. I love the word surrender.
Yeah.
And there's really something I have learned, and I think I'm learning to surrender ideal Jess. And the trade-off there is in surrendering your idealized version of you allows you to actually figure out who the hell you really are.
Yes.
Right? Like this is a form of spiritual practice in my mind.
Yep. Yeah.
You know, just as we're in conversation with our higher self, like we got to be in conversation with this idealized self that we have constructed.
Totally. And in the present self, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you actually want? What do you need?
Oh,
What do you need from me right now, girl? I had a huge awakening around this in my salsa dancing, because there was like the ideal salsa dancer. I'd be out dancing and I'd see these women with like their styling, their professional, and then you come to learn that this woman's been dancing since she was 3 years old. I didn't learn how to dance till I was in my 20s. And like, I think I should have better footwork. I should men prefer dancing with that. I can't care. All the time I spend caring about that, I'm not having fun.
Right. It depletes your joy.
And that's what I'm there to do.
Yes. And so when we do this, like, we deplete ourselves, I think, of so much joy. We're in our head. And again, I mean, I think this all comes back to the affirmation of self, the community piece, and figuring out like how do I center my life not around trying to be this perfect version of myself, but how do I create a life that is going to care for Jessica when she's at her lowest?
Yes.
Right. And part of that for me is acquiescing to the fact that like there are going to be lots of lows in my life just from a mental health perspective, but also just life. And so if I have created a life in which ideal Jess could thrive, in which I am working 10 projects at once, I'm getting up every day at 5:30, I'm doing all the things, I'm like eating, like all of those things, I'm going to crash and burn so much faster when shit goes wrong. And so how do I build a container to hold, you know, future self or lowest self, in which present self can absolutely thrive, but that I'm not creating a life in which I'm setting myself up to fail.
Yes. My goodness. And then, you know, when we do the other thing, because when it's based on all the ideals and we're so attached to that stuff, when shit does hit the fan, the way sometimes that we respond and react to soothe ourselves just sends us into a place that is even harder to dig out of. It's so self-violent in the long run. The long game on that is self-violence. Yeah,
no, it's total self-harm, self-flagellation. We're so hard on ourselves.
We have a little more time. Can we talk more about the keeping us in individuality versus forming community? Because, and you know, you see posts, there's a meme. I love memes. You know, I love memes.
You love a meme.
There's a meme that says something along the lines of, nobody talks about the miracle of Jesus of having 12 close friends in his 30s.
Oh boy.
So
Yeah.
like adult friendship, and part of that is community, and there's different types of communities, right? But there's some people who might be listening going, that's awesome for you all, that you have all these people that you can reach out to that support you or whatever. But some folks do feel alone, or they feel like they can't trust people, all these things. What's your advice, or what's your experience for not only establishing community, but also navigating as community shift, right? I know, especially at our age, in my 30s, I've had so many folks kind of cycle in and cycle out as they build their families, as they have children, like people I was really close to that just like don't have the bandwidth for their single friend at the moment. They need to be in mom land and like hunker down and have that support. And I know it's not personal, but it doesn't make it any less heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Anything you could say about that?
Growing up, when I was struggling with friendships, my mom would always say to me, Jessie, in life, you are lucky if you have one or two very close friends. And she's right. And it's incredible what you can do when you have those one or two folks in your corner.
Yeah.
There was a post that I shared, and I can't remember what handle it was from, but the gist of it was, if you're worried about telling a friend about like something great that happened, right? Like if you're worried about sharing the awesome because of how they might react, then like I think the post was like, then get rid of them, right? But I think that struck a chord, because I think that a lot of us have relationships with folks who can't celebrate us entirely, and that I think leads to some of this tension. Anyways, that was a tangent. Creating community. So for me, relationships are the most important thing in my life. I used to say it was spiritual practice, but it's relationship, and I believe
relationship
now
is a spiritual practice.
It is a spiritual practice, right? To be in communion with people, like deep, honest, and it is hard, and it pushes all my buttons, because I like conflict professionally. It's really hard for me in intimate relationships and friendships. So when I think about like creating community and the people who have come and gone, what is solid to me is values.
Yeah.
Right? Like we have to share similar values. And I have to be able to have someone who can provide that mirror for me, but who can also affirm me, that accountability piece, that there is joy. All of us, I think, have those friendships where you just feel depleted and empty after you talk, or the phone rings and you don't want to pick up, or the text comes in and your like stomach flips. And I'll be honest, like I'm not always the best at confronting that and really engaging with that head on. That is something that I've learned a lot from you about, actually. And I will just say, I think there's this idea, and I think it's very much perpetuated in online spaces, that everybody has like so many people in real life. And I think that a lot of folks have a ton of incredible relationships online, and I'm always astounded by how deep and meaningful those connections are. But I want to talk about like IRL community.
Yes, in real life.
Yes. And that's something, I've really struggled with. I moved to Los Angeles 2 years ago, and that piece has been really hard. And it's something that I get really frustrated about, I'll kind of mourn about, because I'm a person who really needs that in person. So like I saw Elizabeth last week and you gave me a knee hug.
Mm-hmm.
I needed a knee hug.
It's a full body hug, y'all. When you
Yeah.
hug someone, you also alternate your knees and you squeeze everything. So there's full contact. You might not want to do it with everyone, but with your closest people,
It's real good.
it's really delicious.
But what also comes up for me is the expectations that we have about other people. Right? And this like wanting our friends to show up the way we show up for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I am guilty of this like all the time. And
which good luck to anyone,
myself,
because the way
right?
you show up is like, it's so rare and so incredible.
Yeah, well, I set myself up for fail now. But right, like, and not having like these super high bars and expectations of people. And I also think like I was so astounded. About 3 years ago, my long-term partner, who I had been supporting financially so he could write a novel. And we were together forever at that point. So like I was fully committed and excited and happy to be able to do this. Came in and was like, I'm out. This is over. And I was so devastated, and also it was so surreal.
Mm-hmm.
And what I recognized in the months that followed was there were so many people who held me in such greatly different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And folks who I never would have thought would have like shown up in my texts or in my voicemail. And so there's also this piece around, I had never let people in that much. I had never let myself be held that much because I was, fiercely like, I don't want to inconvenience people. I can handle all this on my own. And so I think there's also this piece about being in community, about not presupposing how people can hold you and support you, and not giving them a chance to. And in 1 week last year, I had 2 really close friends reach out to me who needed to borrow some cash. And I was so grateful because I was in a position, to like be able to like PayPal them,
Mm-hmm.
but also because I just felt so grateful that they felt comfortable.
Yes.
Like that is a frigging gift. And to be able to meet with them with that, and that is a way in which like I up until that point hadn't realized like, oh, that is another way that I can show up for somebody. Leveraging what you got when you got it.
Yeah, I love that. Same. And I had a similar experience when a relationship ended. The people that showed up and like pulled me in and were like, we got you, girl. You're not going to do this again. You don't have to worry about this. And what's so beautiful to me is about, like you said, who shows up and why.
Yeah.
The people who go, oh, I had that experience and there were people who carried me through this. So I'm going to do that now for you.
Mm-hmm.
Say, like I'll have people reach out to me who have experiences coming out of emotionally abusive relationship, dealing with narcissistic folks. And they'll be like, I don't want to bother you. And I'm like, this is no bother. I had
bring it on.
Pull me in. I am so happy to, what do you like? Call me. Here's my number. Text me, vent. And then you know what? And some of those relationships last as long as they need me.
Okay. Amen. Amen to that. Okay. Amen to that. Because there's a certain type of relationship that I'm in with people where I'm amazing in crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are in crisis, I will be on the phone with you 3 times a day. We were going to get you through it. You were going to get the support, the help, the love, whatever it is that you need. And I've realized that this happens over and over in my life. And there are these bursts of deep intensity for an individual. And then it dissipates. Yeah. And it fades. And it's not like I still love them. We're still in contact. but it is not like it is in that like high pressure bubble.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful. There's the saying, like, some relationships are like a season. Do you know that?
Reason, season, lifetime. Yes.
Yeah. I reason, season, lifetime. And I think that is also freeing. And to be able to be in those situations and also kind of acknowledge it. Yeah.
It's so beautiful. It's poetic, it's romantic, it's intimate. And these are the things that we block ourselves from when we're, like you're saying, to loop it back to this whole purpose of this conversation, this perfectionism, these high standards, these if this doesn't look this way, it doesn't count, or it's not that, or it's not good enough, or I'm not going to. When we just like pull back, see what we need, see what people need, what we can provide, what we're good at, and then just dig in and do and give and receive.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to look quid pro quo. I give you this, you give me that. Like you were saying, the gifts thing. I have some friends who are epic gift givers. It's really not a love language.
Bless them.
And you know, it's funny. You were saying you're not a gift giver. Literally the first 2 times we hung out, you showed up with gifts for me.
Well, I didn't know your love language. I had to cover all the bases.
I showed up with all 5 love languages to see what you would respond the best to.
That's right.
I can learn how to love you. That's what you do. So this was so amazing. All right. People are going to want to follow you. They're going to want to know more about you. I know you have different aspects. You have your own personal work. You have your work that you do with Desiree and Erica. So tell the good listeners all the different places where they can engage with you if they so desire.
Oh, that is lovely. So let's see. I am on the Instagrams at j.essicafish.
We'll link to it.
Yeah, we'll link to it. That'll be great. And then, I do, Desiree has her own consulting company called the Attaway Group. Mm-hmm. And Erica has her own company called Every Level Leadership. And I work with both of them. Mm-hmm. And I do my own DEI work out here in Los Angeles. So if you're, West Coast, Southern California, let's connect. And yeah, those are probably the best places, but I will also, give you my email. Yeah. I mean, I show up on my inbox, folks. Like I'm very available.
Cool. And I'm forgetting at the moment, I'm blanking on what episode number this is, but in the intro, we will have said the link to the show notes.
Wonderful.
And we would have given that. I think it might be 336. I'm not sure if it's 336 or 335. And we'll put
I'll send you some awesome resources around, what we're talking about around dominant culture, how it shows up in organizations and within community. And these are some really great reads for folks.
You're amazing. I am so appreciative. Thank you for the time and your energy. And really, one of my favorite things about you, I feel like just talking to you deepens my own analysis on like 27 things every time we get together. So I just appreciate like the depth and breadth of your experience and your commitment, because it just friggin' comes through everything. It's so great. And, we're both Gemini rising people, so we love to communicate.
Well, I appreciate, because I know I bounce all around and
That's
I got tangents for days. So
people who listen to this show are used to it. And
okay, all right. Thank you, people.
Yeah, they dig it because it's literally how we've been rolling for 300 plus episodes. So.
Great. I hope I'm 333, but I think you're past that.
No, Stacy was 333.
Oh, okay. So if somebody's got to be 333, it should be Stacy.
I was excited. Right. I think you might be 335. So, all right, Mama, I love you so much. Thank you, anyone listening. Share the episode. This is one of those episodes. It's meaty. You're going to want to listen more than once. I know sometimes people will DM me and be like, I listened to this 4 times. Like, do that. Share it with your friends. This is a good one to have a conversation piece, have a book club, have a gathering, fireside chat. Like, there's some really good stuff here that could be how you spark the conversation in your own relationships. Like, how can we deepen our connection? What do you need from me? Like, you could share those when-thens with your people as a way to build some intimacy, connection, and closeness. So lots of good stuff here. All right, y'all. Have a good one. So this question is about how do you continue to support a loved one when you feel like you have nothing left to give, right? And because you've already given a lot. And are they, you didn't say this, but I'm assuming they're kind of still stuck and spinning in the same place and not listening and all that. So they're talking and talking, but not actually doing, and nothing is changing. So this is challenging because when we love people, and also when you're a growth oriented person, which obviously if you're here, you are, it's hard to relate when people just want to like talk, and they're not doing.